The rain fell in a slow, mournful rhythm, each drop a tiny mirror reflecting the neon glow of the night market. 27-year-old Samir stood drenched outside a small medical store, the paper of a prescription growing soft and damp in his grip. His face, etched with exhaustion, was a mask of desperation. Inside, the store owner, a man with weary eyes, shook his head slowly. "I'm sorry, son," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "That medicine is far too expensive. I can't give it to you on credit." "Not this time." Samir leaned forward, his voice cracking. "Just give me 2 days. I swear, I'll pay you everything. My mother, she needs it tonight, please." The owner's gaze softened with pity, but his resolve held. "I wish I could help you." "I'm sorry." Defeated, Samir turned away. He walked slowly through the deserted street, the cold rain mixing with the hot tears tracing paths down his cheeks, each step heavier than the last. He felt as if the entire weight of the world was pressing down on his shoulders, a burden too heavy to bear. He arrived at the crumbling apartment building. He called home and trudged up the stairs. Inside their tiny one-room apartment, his mother lay on a thin mattress, her body racked by a deep, persistent cough that seemed to steal the very air from the room. His younger sister, Hina, knelt beside her, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth. Hina looked up as he entered, her young eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. "Bye. Did you get the medicine?" Samir's heart shattered. He couldn't bear to show her his failure. He quickly hid the empty prescription behind his back, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. "Not yet, but I will. I promise you, I will." Just as the words left his lips, his phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. His boss. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach as he answered. "Samir." His boss's voice was strained, apologetic. "Listen, I'm so sorry. The company is downsizing. Your position. You know how it is." Samir's world tilted on its axis. "No sir, please. Not now. I need this job. I wish there was something I could do," the voice on the other end said, distant and final. The call ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Samir stumbled out of the apartment and collapsed onto the cold concrete stairs, the last sliver of hope extinguished. He was adrift in a sea of despair, with no land in sight. As he sat there, head in his hands, a sleek black SUV purred to a stop beside him. The tinted window glided down, revealing a woman in the driver's seat. Aisha, 26, radiated an aura of elegance and unshakable confidence that seemed to belong to another world entirely. "You're Samir, right?" she asked, her voice cool and direct. Samir looked up, confused. "Do I know you?" "You worked at my father's company," she explained, her gaze unwavering. "I heard what happened. Get in, we need to talk." Hesitantly, Samir complied, sliding into the plush leather seat. The interior of the car smelled of wealth and power, a stark contrast to the scent of rain and despair that clung to him. Minutes later, they were in a luxurious glass-walled office, overlooking the glittering city. The sheer scale of the room made Samir feel even smaller. Aisha sat opposite him at a massive mahogany desk and slid a document across its polished surface. "I need a husband," she stated, her tone purely transactional. "This is not about love, it's about my inheritance. My father's will has a condition. I'll pay for your mother's complete medical treatment, your sister's education, everything you need. In return, you marry me for 1 year. After that, we go our separate ways." Samir stared at her, stunned into silence. He thought he must have misheard. "You're joking, right?" Aisha's expression remained impassive. "I don't joke about contracts, Samir, but—" "Why me?" he stammered, his mind reeling. "Because you're desperate," she said, her honesty brutal. "And because my father always said you were the most honest man in his company. I need someone I can trust not to complicate things." Samir returned to the dim, oppressive silence of his home. As he entered, his mother was seized by a violent coughing fit, a sound that tore through him like a physical blow. Hina rushed to his side, her face pale with panic. "Bye, we need to do something. She's getting worse." The choice was no choice at all. He stepped back outside, his body trembling as the weight of the decision settled upon him. He looked up at the dark, unforgiving sky and whispered the words that would change his life forever. 1 year, for my family. The ceremony was a cold, sterile affair held in a lawyer's office. There were no guests, no flowers, no music, just the three of them and the rustle of papers. The lawyer pointed to a line on the document. "Sign here, please." Samir's hand hovered over the paper, a tremor running through his arm. This felt so wrong, so surreal. Aisha's gaze met his, her expression calm and unreadable. "You're saving your family," she said, her voice low, "and I'm securing my future. In this moment, we need each other." He took a deep breath and signed his name. Aisha's signature followed, crisp and decisive. They were now, in the eyes of the law, husband and wife. Moving into Aisha's mansion was like stepping onto a different planet. It was a palace of marble and glass, filled with art and silence. "You will stay in the guest wing," Aisha instructed, her voice echoing in the grand foyer. "Remember, this marriage is a business arrangement, nothing more." I understand, Samir replied, his voice barely a whisper. But as she turned to leave, she paused. For a fleeting moment, the mask of a CEO slipped, and he saw a flicker of something else in her eyes. And Samir, she added, her voice softer now. Thank you. The first clash came the very next morning. They were at the breakfast table when Aisha's uncle, a man with a perpetually smug expression, swaggered into the dining room. He looked Samir up and down with disdain. So, Aisha, this is the husband. He looks like he just stepped off a bus. Aisha's jaw clenched, her knuckles white around her fork. Samir remained silent, his gaze fixed on his plate. He is my husband, uncle, Aisha said, her voice dangerously low. Watch your words. Weeks turned into a month. One late night, Samir found Aisha hunched over her laptop in her study, rubbing her temples. You skipped dinner again, he said, standing in the doorway. I'm not hungry, she replied without looking up. You'll make yourself sick, he insisted, stepping into the room. He returned a few minutes later with a tray holding a bowl of soup and a glass of water. He set it on her desk. Aisha finally looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw an unexpected softness in her eyes, a vulnerability she so carefully concealed. They ate in a comfortable silence, and later that night, as he told her a simple, silly story about his childhood, Aisha laughed. It was a genuine, unforced sound that filled the room and, for a moment, bridged the vast chasm between their two worlds. Samir's mother was admitted to the best hospital in the city, her treatment fully covered. One afternoon, Aisha arrived at the hospital unexpectedly, while Samir and Hina were visiting. Hina's face lit up. Baji, thank you so much for helping us. Aisha offered a small, gentle smile. Samir is family now, she said softly. His family is my family. Samir overheard her words from the hallway, and a strange, confusing warmth spread through his chest. It was just part of the act, he told himself. It had to be. But the lines of their arrangement began to blur. Their days fell into a new rhythm, marked by small, shared moments. Aisha, the powerful CEO, patiently teaching Hina English grammar. Samir, the man from the slums, expertly fixing the engine of her vintage sports car. The two of them, standing side by side in the enormous kitchen, arguing playfully over the right amount of spice for a curry. There were small smiles, lingering glances, and a silent understanding that grew between them, a fragile new plant taking root in barren soil. Love was forming, unspoken and unacknowledged. Then, the past came crashing back. Arman Ayasho's, handsome and arrogant ex-fiancé, returned from abroad. He cornered her at a charity gala, his eyes blazing with fury. You married him? He sneered, gesturing dismissively towards Samir, a nobody. Aisha, this is a childish game. End it. Leave Arman, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You will regret this, he vowed before storming away. Aisha looked shaken, and Samir saw it. Later that week, Arman confronted Samir outside the mansion. She's only using you, you know, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Do you really think a woman like her could ever care for someone like you? The contract has a 1-year expiry date. Then you're back on the street, where you belong. Samir said nothing, but his eyes fell to the ground. Arman's words were venom, and they had found their mark. The tension culminated at Aisha's birthday party. It was a grand affair, and Samir felt more out of place than ever. He could hear the whispers that followed him through the crowd. He doesn't belong here. What a blatant gold digger. Aisha overheard them too, but she stayed quiet, a strained smile fixed on her face. Samir saw her discomfort, her unwillingness to defend him in front of her elite circle, and it felt like a betrayal. Back in the silent emptiness of the mansion, the storm broke. Why didn't you say anything? Samir demanded, his voice raw with hurt. You just let them talk about me like that. I didn't want to cause a scene, Aisha stammered, so keeping me hidden is better, he shot back. This marriage may be a contract to you, a business deal you can control. But for me, this is my reality. It's my life. Aisha stared at him, her face pale and her eyes wide with a pain he hadn't expected. She was speechless. Later that night, alone in her room, she finally let her composure crumble, crying silent tears into her pillow. Why? She whispered to the darkness. Why does he affect me so much? The next morning, she found him by the window, staring out at the rain. She approached him cautiously. Samir, about the contract, she began, her voice barely audible. I know it all started wrong. It was a transaction, but somewhere along the way, you became more than a deal to me. Samir's breath caught in his throat. He turned to face her, his heart hammering against his ribs. Aisha, before he could finish, Arman burst into the office, his face a mask of rage. Aisha, this has gone on long enough. Come back to me. Leave him. Aisha took a step back, but this time, there was no fear in her eyes, only fire. I don't want you, Arman. I choose him. I choose Samir, even if he never chooses me back. The words hung in the air. Samir rushed to her side as soon as Arman was gone. Why would you say that? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. Because it's the truth, she whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. He took her hands in his grip firm and certain. "I choose you too, Aisha," he said, his voice filled with a conviction that came from the depths of his soul. "Not because of any contract, but because you are the only person who ever truly fought for me." A tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. A few days later, in the same lawyer's office where their journey began, they sat across from each other again. Samir slid a new document across the table. Aisha looked at it, confused. "What's this?" He smiled, a real, brilliant smile that reached his eyes. "A lifetime agreement." Aisha's laugh came through her tears as she picked up the pen. They embraced softly, not as business partners, but as two souls who had found their home in the most unexpected of places. Weeks later, they stood together in a sun-drenched park. Samir's mother was on the road to a full recovery, and Hina was at the top of her class. He and Aisha walked hand in hand, their fingers intertwined. Aisha leaned her head on his shoulder. "So, are you happy?" she asked softly. Samir looked at her, his eyes filled with a love that was deeper and more real than any contract could ever define. "More than I ever thought possible." The night air was warm, a gentle caress against Esther's face as she stepped outside the house. She paused, the weight of 1,000 unspoken words pressing down on her. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, she let the tension seep out of her shoulders. She steadied herself, the quiet of the night offering a stillness her home no longer could. A single thought, clear and sharp, formed in her mind, a quiet promise to herself. Esther, softly to herself, "I deserve peace." With that whispered vow, she walked to her car, the familiar click of the door echoing the finality of her decision. She started the engine and drove away, not looking back. The city lights streaked past her window, a vibrant blur that mirrored the rush of emotions inside her: fear, relief, and an overwhelming sense of forward motion. Each mile put between her and the house felt like a step toward a forgotten version of herself. Later that night, Esther found herself in her old childhood bedroom, a sanctuary from a life that had become a cage. She lay awake, staring at the familiar patterns on the ceiling, her mind a quiet, empty space. There were no tears left to cry, only a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. The fight had drained her, leaving her hollowed out but strangely calm. As the first hints of morning light slipped through the thin curtains, a new resolve began to crystallize within her. She sat up, the weariness of the previous night replaced by a quiet strength. It was time to face what she had left behind. The sun was just beginning to cast its golden rays over the city when Esther returned to the house. She found Chuka sitting in the living room, exactly where she expected him to be, his posture slumped in a caricature of remorse. He looked up as she entered, his eyes pleading. "Chuka, Esther, please, let's talk." Esther said nothing. She walked to the couch and dropped her handbag onto the cushion with a soft thud. The sound seemed to break the tense silence. "Esther, there is nothing left to talk about." "Chuka, it was a mistake. I was—" Esther firm, cutting him off. "Stop, let's not pretend. This marriage was built on pressure, not love. It was a performance for our families, for society. It was never for us." Chuka stood and took a hesitant step closer, his hands outstretched as if to physically bridge the chasm that had opened between them. "Chuka, so you'll end everything because of one bad moment? After everything we've built?" A sad, hollow laugh escaped Esther's lips. It was a sound devoid of humor, filled only with the bitterness of wasted years. "Esther, this ended long before today. We've just been going through the motions." Without another word, she walked past him, her destination clear. She headed for the bedroom, the room they had shared, which now felt like a stranger's space. In the bedroom, she began to pack, her movements calm and methodical. She folded her clothes with a detached precision, placing them into a small bag. Each folded shirt, each neatly placed pair of shoes, was an act of liberation. Chuka appeared in the doorway, his frame blocking the light, a desperate look on his face. "Chuka, you can't leave. What will I tell my mother? What will people say?" Esther paused, her hand stilling over a folded dress. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not a husband, but a man trapped by the same expectations that had nearly suffocated her. "Esther, I can, and I am." She zipped the bag closed, the sound sharp and final. She walked past him without a glance, leaving him standing in the doorway of their empty room, a ghost in the life they once pretended to have. The courthouse hall was quiet, the air thick with the silent stories of lives at a crossroads. Esther stood before a clerk, her posture straight, her voice steady as she spoke the words that would formally begin her new life. "Esther, I want to file for separation." The clerk, a woman with weary but kind eyes, took the documents and stamped them with a heavy, definitive thud. The sound resonated through the quiet hall, a punctuation mark on the end of a long, painful chapter. As Esther stepped back outside into the bright sunlight, she took a deep, cleansing breath. The warmth on her face felt like a benediction. For the first time in months, maybe even years, she felt light. Her old duplex was just as she had left it, coated in a thin layer of dust, a time capsule of a life put on hold. She entered slowly, running a hand over the familiar furniture. It was a home that was truly hers, bought with her own money, filled with her own choices. A quiet joy filled her as she began the work of restoring it. She wiped down surfaces, swept away the dust and cobwebs, and opened the windows to let the fresh air circulate. By evening, the duplex was clean, and she stood in the center of the living room, a faint, genuine smile gracing her lips. This was her space. This was her start. In a cozy, sunlit office, Esther sat across from Mrs. S., a therapist whose warm, calm presence immediately put her at ease. MRSEZE. You've spent so long living for others, for your mother, for your husband, for society's expectations. What do you want for yourself, Esther? The question was so simple, yet so profound. Tears welled in Esther's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of being seen for the first time. She smiled through them, a wave of relief washing over her. The weeks that followed were a montage of rediscovery. Esther joined a book club, losing herself in stories and lively debates with new friends. She started practicing yoga on Saturday mornings, learning to connect with her body and find stillness in her mind. She took long, solitary walks in the evenings, watching the sunset and finding beauty in the quiet moments. Driven by a newfound sense of purpose, she started a small project, using her financial background to help the women at the local market with financial literacy. Laughter came more easily now, and with it, her confidence gradually returned, blooming like a flower that had finally been given sun and water. One afternoon, her sisters, Amaka and Chidinma, arrived at her duplex, their arms laden with bags of fruit and snacks. Their faces were etched with worry. Maka, we heard everything. We were so scared for you, Chidinma, but seeing you now, this light in your eyes, we're so proud of you. Esther's smile was wide and genuine as she pulled them into a tight hug, the familiar comfort of their support, a balm to her soul. The inevitable phone call from her mother came a few days later. The voice on the other end was sharp, laced with anxiety and disapproval. Mama, on phone, you left your home. Esther, what have you done? People are talking. The shame you are bringing on this family. A year ago, these words would have sent a chill of fear down her spine. A year ago, she would have crumbled. But now, she stood firm, her voice calm and measured. Esther, Mama, I left a situation that wasn't right for me. I chose my peace. There was a long, stunned pause on the other end of the line. For the first time, Esther had not bent to the will of her mother's fears. Mama, quietly, we will talk later. As the call ended, Esther felt the last vestiges of the fear that had once controlled her dissolve completely. She was no longer a daughter defined by obligation, but a woman defined by her own choices. Weeks turned into months. Esther walked with a new confidence, a spring in her step. Her community project flourished, and the women she helped began to see real changes in their lives, thanking her with grateful hearts for empowering them. She was not just surviving, she was thriving. For the first time, Esther felt a deep, abiding sense of purpose. At a fundraising gala for a local charity, the hall glowed with warm lights and buzzed with conversation. Esther was standing near the buffet table when a gentle voice spoke beside her. Conal, good evening. I'm Conal. I volunteer with the orphanage the foundation is supporting tonight. She turned to see a man with kind eyes and a calm, easy presence. They started talking, first about the charity project, then drifting effortlessly to books, music, and travel. Hours passed in what felt like minutes, their conversation a comfortable, engaging dance. Kunal, you carry your strength with such grace. It's a rare and beautiful thing to see. Esther felt a soft blush rise to her cheeks, a warm, grateful feeling spreading through her chest. It wasn't flattery, it was an observation, one that saw her not as a broken thing to be fixed, but as a whole person who had weathered a storm. Back home that night, she stood on her small balcony, the city a tapestry of glittering lights below, the sky a vast, starlit canvas above. She looked out at the world, her heart full, and whispered a quiet truth into the night air, a declaration meant only for herself. Esther, I am enough. Her smile was peaceful, born not from the validation of a new man, but from the profound realization that she had saved herself. Her new beginning wasn't about finding someone else, but about finding her own way back to who she was always meant to be. Her life was now a vibrant collage, leading workshops, helping other women build their own small businesses, sharing laughter with her neighbors, and enjoying the simple, unpressured beauty of her days. Kunal was occasionally a part of that picture, their connection growing slowly, naturally, a gentle companionship with no demands or expectations. As dusk settled over the city one evening, Esther sat on her balcony, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple. The city glowed, and her heart was calm, serene, and full. Esther, soft whisper, love will come when it comes, but my happiness starts with me. She closed her eyes, a peaceful smile on her face, finally, beautifully, and completely at home with herself.